Resetting, rebuilding, refreshing, all of the things are all fun and games when it is your choice to rebuild your life, when it is your choice to refresh. But what do you do when it is not your choice? When you are forced to reset, when you are forced to reimagine, and you are forced to refresh your life? So that's what I want to talk about today. I know a lot of the times when I'm talking about rebuilding lives and really moving yourself forward when you feel stuck, I'm talking about doing these things of your own choice and of your own volition. But there are many times in life, and I think especially as we get into our late 30s, our early 40s, really at any age, but I think that this time period really gives way to so many times when we have to make changes that maybe we just did not want to make. So I'm Amber J. Adams. This is the Fab Life Project. On this channel, I talk about defining happiness and success on your own terms at any age, but I really focus in on that millennial experience because I know that we have had to adapt to so many changes, many of them that we didn't ask for. And so I really like to talk about that here because I think as we go into our late 30s, our early 40s, it becomes so easy for us to either feel really stuck and not feel as if we have the choices and the chances to be able to make changes, or we start to feel a little bit stale and stagnant in our life. Maybe everything looks really well on paper, it's going according to plan, but it doesn't feel good to you anymore. And so that is what I talk about here. I create videos every week. If you like what you see, subscribe, tune in, all of the things. But let's get into what we want to talk about today, which is, what do you do when you have a forced reset and a hard refresh, meaning that you find yourself having to rebuild? Maybe it's rebuilding your life, maybe it's rebuilding your career, thinking about relationships differently. Like, you find yourself in a space where you are having to make changes that you didn't think that you were going to make, that you weren't trying to make, that these were things that you did not volunteer for. So this has been really on my mind heavily because I think shifting one into 2025, 2024 was a forced reset year for me. Now, I tried to make the most of it, but it definitely wasn't a reset that I volunteered for. I did not raise my hand and say, please give me all of this, all of this mess in 2024. And then here's where starting 2025, my heart is really in California. And I'm just thinking about how so many people right now are having to do a forced reset. They are going to have to rebuild. And so I know that, while I'm talking about this topic in a more, I won't even say high level way, a way that isn't necessarily pointing to destructive things that maybe have happened in your life, but they are things where you're finding yourself in a place where you have to start over. And so I've been thinking about that a lot as we've watched what's going on in California, because that is truly um, an overwhelming amount of rebuilding that is going to have to happen there. And so I think one of the things that I think about when, how do you deal with a forced reset and a forced rebuild? For me, and this is coming from what I learned, especially over the last year, is the role that vulnerability really plays in that. I think a lot of times when things happen and they are unexpected and unplanned and things that we do not want to do, the natural inclination that we might have is to hide. It is to try to hide how much we might be hurting, how upset that we are, how disappointed, just really trying to put on this brave face and continue to march through and continue to push through, even when that is the last thing that we want to do and it's taking so much energy. So one of the things that I think is just so important when you find that you have to do this forced reset and you are forced to rebuild is to really allow yourself to be vulnerable, to find the places and the spaces, whether that is, your community, your friends, just people around you who can allow you to crumble. I definitely had this when I came back to the US from London. So was, I spent a good chunk of time in the UK with my former partner. And when we broke up and I came back to the United States, it was a really, really hard time for me. And I am somebody who isn't traditionally good at being vulnerable. I am not the person who just shares my feelings all over the place. But this time in my life, it demanded it. I had no choice but to really surrender and figure out how I was going to allow people to prop me up because I did not have the energy and the motivation, just straight up the bandwidth and the capability to be able to prop myself up during that time. And I had to be vulnerable with the people around me. Um, and it was hard, but I do think it is so important that as you are looking at rebuilding, and this might be down to, one of the changes that preceded that, of course, getting laid off from your job, that is a major change. Relationships, major change. And to get a little bit deeper, in this stage and age of the game, we're also seeing people who are losing people in their lives. And that is also a major time and case for a rebuild and a reset and a hard reset that you didn't ask for as well. So that vulnerability piece is so important. The other thing, and that's really a good segue, I think is really making space for the grief that comes with the forced reset and that forced rebuild. There is, while I think eventually down the road you find the silver lining, the gratitude, all of those things that we're just supposed to like immediately jump into, there is a lot of grief before you can get to that place. There is the sadness of having to reconcile that your life may not play out the way that you thought it was going to go, that the plan that you had made, that you were really focused on executing and sticking to, is no longer an option, that people are not in your life anymore, whether that be because of, death, or because maybe they have just exited stage left. um, and even if it was something that maybe some of these changes needed to happen, you might see that later on. It does not mean that in that moment that you have to cling to trying to paint a rosy face on all of this. It is okay to be sad. It is okay to be angry, to be mad, to wonder, why is this happening to you? Yeah, it's okay to have all of those things, and it's healthy to have all of those things. But I found that really giving myself the space to grieve and to be sad, and grief, it comes in waves. So you might be up one moment, down the next, but you just got to ride it. You just got to like hang on and let it go, was so important. The other thing, and now thinking about, okay, it's forced, it's not something that you want to do, but thinking about how you rewrite that narrative, exploring who you are becoming after this reset, who you are becoming after this forced change. What does this mean for you now? I think one of the hardest things about having to rebuild when it's not what you asked for is that you were still very much in that other story. That other story might have been really working out for you, or at least, you were in it and you thought you knew what was going to happen. And now all of a sudden, you've got to rewrite the story of what is going to be next for you. You've got to figure out how to move yourself forward. And, I am a career coach as well as someone who loves personal development and wants to encourage people to really, of course, live the best life that they possibly can. But I see this all the time when I am coaching, that rewriting of the narrative, Because what happens, especially when you are doing a forced reset in a job and career situation, is you sometimes have taken on the identity of that role. And so you don't know what your story looks like beyond that moment. You don't know what that next chapter holds. And it can be so disconcerting, but it also can give you a lot of space to start to explore who you are in this next phase. What is it that you want to be doing? And yes, it might be a setback, definitely, but a lot of setbacks are a setup for the next. And I firmly believe that. And I see that all the time, whether I'm coaching clients or in my own life with changes that I've had to make as well. So, the last thing I'm going to give you, because we don't want this to be a long video, um, I just want to give you some things to ponder. It's really that acceptance and the ownership. I think in a lot of ways, we've kind of taken that arc of the grief, of being vulnerable, of making a space to grieve and be sad and mourn, to recognize that your story will have to change. But it's also just that acceptance and the ownership that can come with that, that I think helps you get to that next stage. That when you accept that things have changed, that they are not going back to what they were, and that that moment is now a memory for you. Now you can take ownership of what's next. You can start to look forward again. You can start to take those forward steps and say, okay, what am I going to do now? And that, when you get to that stage, because I do think you asked that question multiple times. I think at the front end, when you're in the vulnerable stage, when things have first happened, you ask yourself, what am I going to do now? And the energy that comes with that is more sad. It is more just heavy. But I think that when you get to the space where you are accepting the rebuild, the refresh, whether you wanted it or not, you get to a place where you can say, okay, what am I going to do now? And you start to see that you are coming from a place of power, that you are coming from a place of really being able to own your story once again. Because when that story shifts, it feels like you've lost control and you don't know what's going on and what the heck. But when you get to the place where you're starting to own that story again and say, okay, what's next? I think that that can be a beautiful place to be. And I'm not going to say that it happens overnight. It doesn't. I think in many ways, in my own journey of really accepting the refresh that has come into my life and the rebuilds, I haven't even really gotten into all of that yet. Um, it's been a journey. I would say 2024 really took me in and out of a lot of these spaces at multiple times, sometimes simultaneously, but I am starting to feel better and be in this space of looking at a new year, a big year for me, and really saying, okay, what now? And really leaning into that place. So, yeah, thank you all so much for stopping and taking the time to watch. I hope that this was really helpful for you. I know that this time in life can feel kind of messy and discombobulating. And my hope and my goal is to be able to really create these videos that inspire you to keep going, to know that you do not have to stay stuck, that you can define happiness and success on your own terms and really create a life that is, of course, fabulous, but one that really feels authentic to who you are and who you wish to be. So, thank you. I'll see you next time. Remember, if you like this, like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.